opinion will say no. The question now is that clauses 1, 2 and 3 stand part. Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, it is with some disappointment that we've reached this stage of the debate with some of the more substantial parts not being able to be included at this point in the discussion. Because, Mr Chair, some of the amendments and the clauses that are left for debate, in all of this, they are still contingent, of course, of the coroner's reports carrying some weight. So if this bill in its entirety, whether it be the discussion that we've had about narrowing down what a coroner reports on, down to the different jurisdictions that some of the subparts set out, and deaths to be reported and post-mortems as they're set out in the final schedules, all of that is set out so that we can have an efficiently run system where there's a clear jurisdiction for coroners. But surely it all leads to naught, Mr Chair, if there's actually no requirement for us to do anything off the back of a coroner's report. All of this debate around the jurisdiction of coroners, the difference between whether or not they're resuming or adjourning an inquiry, the role of pathologists versus coroners, surely all of that just becomes a debate of fancy if at the end of the day what a coroner produces as a report holds no weight, absolutely none. So, Mr Chair, my frustration with us being at a point where we're debating consequential amendments and some of the consequential amendments as they relate to the Burial and Cremation Act, Search and Surveillance Act, visiting forces, all of that still is a debate around the detail when actually the coroner themselves are producing reports at great expense to the taxpayer that hold no weight. And Mr Chair, we had an opportunity here in this debate to give just a little bit more clout to those reports, where the opportunity for those recommendations not to be enforced, not to be compulsory, but at least to trigger a response. And I would have thought, Mr Chair, that the families who are involved in these situations, the families who find themselves in a tragedy, be it via an aviation accident, and we had a lot of those people come before the Select Committee and talk about the deaths in the agricultural sector, agricultural aviation, right through to the families who came and talked about the deaths, the tragic death that related to the hot air balloon north of Wellington. All of those cases, Mr Chair, those families surely would want to see at least a requirement from those companies who are involved, those Crown entities who are involved, those Crown organisations, to at least look and respond to a coroner's report. So my argument, Mr Chair, as we reach to the conclusions of debating the consequential amendments, the schedule to this bill, is that actually it all just becomes trivia if we can't at least conclude as a parliament that what a coroner says matters, that what a coroner concludes is worth that investment from taxpayer, worth the submissions that those family members and organisations produce, worth the time that it takes, because here we have debated at great length, oh, when should we have an inquiry, when should we have an inquest, we've got to save some time and some money. Well, what are we saving time and money for? Apparently so people can do a full inquest when it's required, so that we can then ignore everything that they say. Mr Chair, the final response that I'd like to make then in relation to all of those subsequent amendments and schedules is the debate becomes pointless if we don't have the ability to speak, if we don't have some requirement on those affected organisations to at least respond, Mr Chair. And that's a point I want to underline in this final concluding debate in this House. Thank you, Mr Chair.
Stuart Nash.
Thank you much, Mr Chair. Mr Chair,